Guess who's back? Back again! It's the wood clay packet that I only half used in my trying wood clay for the first time video. If you saw that video, you may remember that this clay is interesting, with actual wooden fibres smooshed into its very being, and essentially looks like a sugary biscuit dough in the packet. Don't eat it! Anywho, I got lots of helpful insight from you, my lovely pen friends, in the comments of that last video, and I've been wanting to try this stuff again because I think I can enjoy it more this time around, not least because I want to experiment with carving it. Say what? Yep, I said carving, and that is the end goal for this experimental clay session. The question is, once this clay is hard, can we carve it just like actual wood with tiny sharp things? Can we whittle wood clay? Who flipping knows, but we will find out. Before we can do that fun bit though, we need to clay something. I figure that whatever we try and carve later should be a pretty simple shape to give us the best chance of success, seeing as I don't really know what I'm doing. And seeing as we are approaching the festive season, I'm going to make a hanging tree decoration. I make a loop of twine for the hanger and then ball up some tin foil to be padding in the centre of my decoration. I can smoosh the clay around it rather than have the whole thing be solid clay, which will hopefully mean it'll dry out that bit quicker and also end up a little bit lighter in weight. I spear a hole down the core of the tin ball and then thread through the twine loop. Decoration innards, check. Okay, you weird woody clay, let's get to know each other again. Squishy, squishy, sticky, gritty. I'm rolling a lump out so that I can get a flat bit that I can then bend around the tin ball. I kept it kinda thick because of the thought to later try carving the surface. I squeeze it around the ball with jolly optimism, trying to ignore the fact that it looks like it's cracking immediately. It is all okay. I will smooth them out. I deny you cracks. So, last time I found smoothing out this clay was pretty tricky, but one thing I did figure out is that for some reason my plastic tools work on it a lot better than my metal ones. Intriguing. Therefore, with my trusty purple plastic stick dampened with a bit of water, I start sorting out the crackage, pushing the clay together in those cracky crevices and then slowly sweeping them smoother. I gotta say, I'm pretty happy with how this works. The clay is always going to have that gritty texture to it, and the fibres will always be waving at me from the surface. Hi, hi. But I do think I get a certain type of rough smoothness this time, and it pleases me. It feels rustic, no? So can you tell what I'm making this into? It's going to be a Christmas pudding. And I will admit to you that this idea came about off the back of me quite simply loving the idea of calling it a wooden pudding. It really does not take much to get me in an enthusiastic making mind, and having any kind of rhyme involved just heightens my headiness. So my little pudding needs some topping, and therefore an extra layer of thinner clay cut into a wiggled edge is being plopped on. I do attempt to smooth the edges of this in my hand first, but it doesn't feel that successful, so I figure it'll work better once it's stuck on the ball. Cue more smooshing and smoothing. I made a Playmobil character's head. Let's stick some tiny balls on top of it to make it more puddingy. These were actually rather straightforward to do. I think this clay works a whole lot better when you are making more organic forms. I certainly feel less frustrated this time around, and I think that's because of two things. For one, with a little experience comes reflection and learning. Trying anything for the first time is a bit of a mystery adventure, and you take into it only the expectations and experiences you've previously had. In trying wood clay for the first time, I knew it would be different to other clays, but I didn't really know how. Not practically. I had read about the wood fibres in the textures, but I didn't know how they would feel on my fingers. Sometimes the surprises of an experiment can bring excitement, other times they can unbalance. The item I made in my first wood clay video, looking back, was just not a good fit for the type of clay I was using. I was trying to fit two things together that just weren't vibing. So for two, this time around, with this tiny bit of knowledge that I now have, I am making with the type of clay leading the way. And this is why I would always recommend trying arty things again, even if you didn't really love it the first time. Because you never know, on the second time around, having thought about why it didn't work and why you disliked it, you might find you approach it differently and enjoy it more. Getting distracted because it looks like a head with two eyes and a really big loopy nose. Loopy nose. Alright, this is where we're at. I pop in a few dots for currants and we are done. It's time for this chonky decoration to go and dry. Goodbye! So just to use up the last bits of this clay packet, I'm going to quickly make another dangly decoration, but keep it oh so simple. I'm thinking it might be handy to have one that I don't really care about as much, that we can practice the carving on first, just in case it doesn't work, and so I don't ruin my lovely pud. And so this is just going to be a cone shape that could later be chipped into and made possibly to look like a tree. Very unexciting really, but it will be a helpful test pilot, and maybe it'll be a cute bonus decoration if it all goes well. I also have one tiny ball of clay left, so I go with my impulse and make it into a little head. No reason really, except it can be another tester, and it means I have used up my wood clay packet, which is satisfying. I spent way too long trying to get the eyes level and the same amount of deep, and so we'll skip by that footage because you just don't need it in your life. So hurrah, these are all of the clay bits on their little drying tray. I'm going to take them inside the house as it's pretty cold in the shed. Hopefully that'll help them to dry out that smidge quicker, and we will come back when they are toasty and we can attempt the carving bit. Hee hee! So, after 6 days, they seem pretty dry, so I get my carving tools out to give them a go. I try the flat tip first, but it is not working. It feels like it is just gouging bits of biscuit out. I try the V-shaped tip too, but nope, same thing. The clay feels too soft under the knife edge and it just won't cut clean. But, on the bottom, it does look a bit drier and harder. And when I try the V-shaped tool there, it's cutting a bit cleaner. So maybe there's a chance that if I let everything dry for a few more days, maybe it'll be possible. Fingers crossed. All right, we're back again after 2 more days, and at first I'm thinking it's not going to work because the first swipe that I take gouges a little pocket and it still feels soft. However, look at this. How exciting is this? On the upper part, which I think must be drier than the bottom, I'm able to skim the clay away as I hoped. I am utterly chuffed. This is what I had in my head, being able to carve away the surface to get that lovely flat but textured feel that's a little bit lumpy but actually does look like whittled wood. I tried the V-shaped tool and that works well too. The other thing I try is using a small metal file. This was my backup idea in case I couldn't carve at all. I figured I could sand back lots of small areas at different angles and maybe get that same flat but uneven feeling, and it kind of works, but in a subtler way. I did try a test patch on the bottoms of both the head and the pudding, but both were still too soft for carving. Oh, very frustrating. But I'm just going to have to wait a little bit longer for them to be ready. So before I leave them again, I do a little filing around the eyes on the head and around the icing edges on the pudding just to smooth them out. But then I put them back to snooze mode to carry on their rather long drying journey. I don't actually know how long I left them this time. I think it was at least another 5 days. It felt like a very long-winded project by this time. I tried carving the bottom of the little head and it gouged a bit at first, but then it did start working. However, the further up I went, the less clean the cuts became, and it just didn't feel like it was going to work all over. I made a tentative attempt on the bottom of the pudding, but this just gouged out the clay like before. It just felt like spherical things were not going to work for some reason, and I really didn't want to mess up the pud more, so I settled for sanding and filing it a bit more and moving on. It's so odd though, because it really did work on the tree. It must be a combo of the clay being thinner and therefore drying better, and the straighter surfaces. I decided to carve in a little face, just eyes and a mouth, to try and jazz it up a bit. It is just a cone after all, and of course the tree texture and face are all things I could have tried to simply mould into the clay when it was wet. Though I do think that in carving it later, the texture lines are much cleaner than they might have been if I'd done that. I remember how tricky it was to get smooth lines in that first project because the wood fibres kept catching. So who knows what's best, but I'm glad I tried it this way. Using acrylic paint to finish these little decorations off. I wasn't too sure what I was aiming for with the cone tree, but in the end I plumped for classic green. I started light, just in case it looked horrendous, then got gradually deeper in colour as it turned out that lighter green looked a little bit meh. I quite liked the rough brush look, letting the texture show through, so I didn't brush too hard. I kept bobbing between each decoration. As each one was drying from one bit of paint, I'd move on to add a bit to another. I added a dark brown into the holes of the eyes on the head, with feathery marks streaking outwards. I mean, it looks a bit funny, but I was going for kind of like an owl vibes, even though the shape of the head is not really owly, but it is a bit. You'll just have to go with me on this. It's already happened and we're stuck with it now. I wanted to keep the old pudding pretty simple and mainly to keep some of the wood colour on show. One of the best things about creating a wooden sculpture is enjoying the wood colour, so I figured this pudding should be the one to highlight a little of the woody goodiness. Therefore, I used gold paint on the berries and on the currant spots, and then added some small, random details on the icing curves. I considered painting a tiny pattern across the whole white icing area, then got a little spooked by thinking it would be too much and that I'd ruin it. What would you have done? Let me know in the comments. Seeing as the gold paint was out, I figured I'd bung it on the tree as well, because all decorations benefit from a little shine, no? I painted the eyes and mouth and couldn't really decide if it was creepy. Then I sponged some gold onto the green, which was fun, though I wasn't too sure if it now looked less tree-like. In an attempt to define the face more, I added black eyeliner and pupils, which I think makes it eerily cute. On a let's use up a bit more white paint from the big blob I blobbed train of thought, I started adding dots all over the tree, and they either look like twinkly Christmas lights or the beginnings of a frosty tree disease. It's inconclusive, and in for a penny, the gold got blobbed onto the owl head too, because I just have a compulsion that is hard to resist. And so here is the final tree. Is it unsettling or sweet? It really is a wondrous balance of both, I think. Considering this was only made as an ad hoc addition to be a test pilot, I think it's turned out quite funny, and although it looks more like a pointy mountain than a tree, I still like it. The little owl head also finished up looking slightly odd, but again, in a way I quite enjoy. Who cares if it makes no sense to anyone? I quite like a bit of quirk in my life. And finally, the reason this project even started, here's the final wooden puddin'. It's simple, but in my eyes, rather lovely. You done good, Pud. So if you're still here, well, aren't you just the shiniest? Thank you so much for watching. I really hope you've enjoyed our wood clay revisit. If you did, please do consider tapping the like button, as it really helps me out. And if you're watching in the first 7 days, look out for the hype button to give it an extra little boost. Jump into the comments and let me know how you've been getting on with wood clay, or whether you are yet to try it, or just pop in and say hi. I love hearing your thoughts and learning from what you've been getting creative with. Stay curious, keep making happy, and I will see you next time.